Hi, everybody. In this short video, I want to discuss approximating roots, particularly square roots. So we've seen some examples on how to simplify square roots. For instance, something like the square root of 25. We know the answer is 5 because 5 squared is 25, right? The opposite of a root is basically the exponent. So we're sort of undoing that squaring action when we have square roots. Or, the square root of 16 is equal to 4 for the same reason. 4 squared would be 16, and so on. And we've seen some ways also to simplify roots as well. So if they don't come up perfectly nice. For instance, if I have something like the square root of 50, that is not a perfect square, but I could break that down and consider the factors there, right? So I could think about my different factors, and I may recognize that 50 is the same as 2 times 25, and 25 is a perfect square. So sometimes we can simplify roots, even if they don't come out perfectly, we can still simplify them a little bit more. So this would be the same thing as the square root of 25 times the square root of 2. Notice I haven't changed the problem. 50 is still 25 times 2. And then I'm able to simplify this first root into 5 root 2. So there are cases where we can either perfectly simplify our square roots or at least simplify them and leave them in root or radical form. However, in this video, I want to talk about using decimals instead. So one way that you can obviously figure out these roots is with your calculator. So let me bring up my calculator for you guys. And let's say I have something like maybe the square root of 17. Now, 17 is not a perfect square. If I try breaking it down to, I really can't even do anything with it. So maybe I'd just like to know an approximation here. Now, everybody's calculator is a little bit different. So I'm using an app here. This one is called Graph and Calc 83. It looks very similar to the TI 8384 graphing calculator series. But any calculator is fine. You're just going to need to know how to use yours. So on this app, my calculator symbol is right, or my root symbol on the calculator is right here. It's in yellow, which means I have to use my second command. So what I would do is hit second and then where that square root key is, and then I could just go ahead and type in 17. And when I'm ready, I can go ahead and hit enter here, and it will give me the approximation. So I get about 4.123. Now, if you have another app, then again, it may work a little bit differently, of course. So this here is I have an iPhone. So this is just the iPhone calculator app. If you don't know this, you can turn your iPhone to the side and a larger calculator screen will open there. And the square root key is right here. So on the iPhone app, it has a little 2 with it to indicate a square root. And then they have cubed root keys and etc. So for the square root key on this app, what you would do is type in the 17 first and then hit the square root key. So what I encourage you to do on your own calculator app or calculator at home is type in something you know the answer to. So for instance, like square root of 25 or square root of 16, and make sure you're getting the right results so that you know how to use your calculator app. So some of them you type the square root first and then the number, others you do the number and then the square root. So you want to make sure you know how to use your calculator. Now the thing is, we would like to check that this actually does make sense. Now, I chose these examples particularly for a reason. So notice if I think about the number 17, well, it's not a perfect square, but it is in between two perfect squares, right? It's in between 16, which is 4 squared, and 25, which is 5 squared. It doesn't hurt to know your squares, by the way. So 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25, 6 squared is 36, 7 squared is 49, 8 squared is 64, 9 squared is 81, and I'll stop at 10. 10 squared is 100. But of course, you can go further than this as well, but it's nice to be able to recognize these. And I can recognize that 17 is between these two perfect squares right here. And if you think about taking the square root of all of these, well, the square root of 16 we said is 4. The square root of 25 we said is 5. And then using our calculator here, we got about 4.123. So this makes sense, right? Because that value is right in between 4 and 5. So we can use the surrounding squares to kind of approximate where it's going to be or get an estimation. Let's try another one. So how about the square root? Let's do square root of 50 that we just did before. So we know how to simplify it in radical form, but what if I just want the decimal answer? So before I do that, let's actually think about an estimation. Well, I know 50. If I look at my squares here, 50 would be right in between here, right? It's in between 49 and 64. So it's bigger than 49, but it's definitely less than 64. So when I take the square root of everything, well, the square root of 49 would be 7, and the square root of 64 would be 8. So I would estimate that the square root of 50 is somewhere between 7 and 8. So using the iPhone calculator first, I'm going to type in that 50. I'm going to type in my square root key, and I see it's 7.07. So this does make sense. Right? Again, it's not exact. It's about 7.07. I'm going to do it on my other calculator app for you guys as well. So here I hit that second key and then my square root function. I go ahead and type in 50, and then I would hit the enter key at the bottom here. And again, I get 7.07. So we can definitely use our calculators to approximate the answers here, but it doesn't hurt to make sure that it seems reasonable that you didn't type something in incorrectly. So for instance, square root of 17 should be between 4 and 5. Square root of 50 should be between 7 and 8. So it's nice to use those perfect squares to help us get an estimation as well.